Not Okay is okay. Written and directed by Quinn Shepard, whose last film was 2017's Blame, Not Okay follows the unlikable Dani Sanders as she makes a series of increasingly bad decisions that lead to her eventual downfall. A satirical dramedy that attempts to comment on internet culture, white privilege, and the lingering effects of trauma, the film is distinctly of its time, having language, themes, and even clothing that are firmly rooted in the 2020s, which is something you'll either love or hate about it. In today's video, I'll be taking a look at the 2022 film, Not Okay, and discuss what I did and didn't like about it. Obviously, there will be spoilers, so don't say I didn't warn you. Now, let's get into it. Self-proclaimed zillennial Dani Sanders has dreams of becoming a journalist but currently works as a photo editor for the digital publication Depravity, a trendy media outlet that is part Vice, part BuzzFeed. Desperate to get the attention of her crush and social media star Colin, Dani lies and tells him she'll be going on a writer's retreat in France and proceeds to spend the next week hiding at home and posting Photoshopped pictures of herself in Paris. This web of lies is put to the test after the Arc de Triomphe is bombed by a group of terrorists, mere minutes after Dani had posted a photo of herself there. Believing that she'd narrowly avoided death, Dani's family, friends, followers, and coworkers all begin to give her the attention she so desperately craves, which prompts her to continue lying about the situation. Seeing this as an opportunity to further her career, Dani decides to attend a trauma support group for research purposes, where she meets school shooting survivor and anti-gun activist Rowan. After receiving some heartfelt advice from Rowan, Dani writes an article about her experience with the terrorist attack, which goes viral and propels her to fame. Feeling absolutely no remorse for her deception, Dani relishes in this newfound public attention, which not only results in her getting her much-coveted job as a writer, but the attention of Colin as well. It's only after a less than satisfactory sexual experience with Colin that she decides to look for love elsewhere, leading her to develop a sisterly relationship with Rowan. And it's only after the girls grow closer that Dani begins to feel guilty for what she's done. But not enough to be honest, of course. One of Dani's coworkers eventually uncovers her deception and forces her to tell everyone the truth. In the immediate backlash, Dani becomes the most hated woman in America. She gets fired from her job, is cut off by Rowan, is viciously attacked on social media, and even gets doxxed. She eventually joins a new support group for people who've been shamed online, and they recommend that she make amends with the people she hurt in order to move on. Although she initially plans to apologize to Rowan, she changes her mind after seeing a spoken word performance where Rowan talks about Dani's betrayal, and the film ends with the audience wondering what's next for the character.
I was on a cruise with my parents when it happened. In general, I think we try to avoid expressing any kind of FOMO about 9/11.
Should we call Mommy and Daddy? See if they'll buy us a ticket?
Did you see Kendall Jenner's post? You did?
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea that she was so discriminated against. You guys are so lucky. You know, you have like a community of a parade, you have your own bowling night.
Yeah, being a minority is great.
Right? Oh, man. Ew.
One of the most interesting elements about Not Okay is its choice to focus on an unlikable female character, which the audience is actually given a content warning for at the beginning of the film. According to director Quinn Shepard, the warning was in response to the way early audiences reacted to the film's protagonist. Quote, "We unironically and consistently got responses from people who were quite literally like, why would someone make a movie with an unlikable woman? It's something I've repeatedly heard and a lot of my other writer friends have as well. If you portray flawed women or women who reflect societal flaws, you get notes like, I literally don't understand why you tell a story about this character." Although this was ironically lost on many viewers of the film, it brings up an interesting point about what is considered acceptable behavior in men versus women. Unredeemable and unlikable male protagonists are fairly common, like Tyler Durden in 1999's Fight Club, or Patrick Bateman in 2000's American Psycho. But it's only in more recent years that unlikable women have been able to grace the screen without being depicted as outright villains. When the film begins, Dani is practically invisible, being spurned by her coworkers and even ignored by her parents, but at no point are we made to feel any pity for her. She isn't Katie Heron or Elle Woods. With her privilege, ignorance, narcissism, and lack of empathy, Dani is meant to represent a very specific demographic, straight, wealthy, white women. She attempts to weaponize these various attributes to appear more sympathetic, and much like her real-life inspirations, she doesn't even realize what she's doing. And this desperate desire to experience struggle and trauma reveals how deluded and out of touch she truly is. Her reprehensible behavior and lack of redemption makes her an incredibly unempathetic protagonist, and there's far less of the "you go girl" sentiments that have sprung up with other female characters like Amy Dunn or Jennifer Check, which was a smart choice on the film's part, as these characters are often coddled just like their real-life counterparts are, and it's refreshing to see Dani depicted in a way that makes it clear that her behavior isn't acceptable. Being at the center of a tragedy would be an average person's worst nightmare, but for Dani, it's the dream, as her quest for social media clout isn't rooted in fame or fortune, but is instead a means of human connection. Her desire to solve her loneliness does make her a bit more relatable. After all, who hasn't yearned for acceptance in some way? But it's obvious that the way she goes about solving the problem is unhealthy, and by criticizing this behavior, the film asks its audience to re-examine their own conduct. Although Dani is punished for her actions, I'm not sure if she actually receives enough of a comeuppance where I feel satisfied. Sure, she's publicly doxxed and harassed, but considering the character herself voices that she doesn't know if she's learned anything, it's obvious that those terrible things didn't make enough of an impact. At no point do I think Dani is truly sorry for what she did. She's just sorry that she got caught and punished for it. Kinda like Ryan in 2020's Promising Young Woman. Sure, this is to reiterate the film's point about privilege and the protection it provides, with Dani being able to move in with her parents the moment the going gets tough, but I still found myself wanting a resolution where there wasn't even a hint of a happy ending. Something kinda like 1999's Jawbreaker, maybe? I have to give a lot of props to Zoe Deutch for managing to portray such a unique character. She's one of those rare actresses who can perfectly sell both comedy and drama, which makes her a perfect fit for black comedies like this. And it's also a testament to her abilities that this character, who is meant to be grating and unlikable, still manages to be different than some of her other similar roles like Madison in Zombieland 2, Peg in Buffaloed, or Erica in Flower. Not Okay follows in the footsteps of other films like 2017's Ingrid Goes West, 2020's Spree, and 2021's Mainstream, which have similarly satirized influencer culture and warned against the dangers of social media fame. But the difference between those films and Not Okay is that Not Okay feels somewhat rooted in reality, with Dani Sanders' rise and fall being something that could actually happen to someone. However, I think this sense of realism is actually detrimental to the film, as there are many moments that are too on the nose to be interpreted any other way. I'm not saying that it's necessary for your film to be ambiguous, but nuance is what makes some films more interesting than others. The film does a solid job of commenting on influencer culture, especially the privileges that come with it, with Dani walking past a newly opened matcha cafe, an early warning sign of gentrification, where influencers are allowed to eat for free. Meanwhile, there's a literal unhoused person being pushed to the side. However, these moments are often played up for comedy, creating a weird dissonance where the audience is laughing at a situation they should actually be appalled at. Although Not Okay attempts to discuss a variety of hot-button issues, they're all addressed in a surface-level manner, resulting in a rather lackluster satire that fails to introduce anything that hasn't already been said before. Take for instance Colin's character, who is the quintessential fuckboy. The film makes it clear that he's a bad guy, only paying attention to Dani once she's famous and tossing her aside the second he's gotten what he wants from her. I feel like a slightly better use of him would have been to highlight his white male privilege, with Colin having his own internet scandal that doesn't wind up affecting him in the slightest. This would not only add more layers to his douchiness, making Dani's interest in him all the more indicative of her lack of self-worth, but would also serve as a baseline for the effects of cancel culture in the film, showing how society is more willing to tear down Rowan and Dani because of their race and gender. I also think the film could have done a better job of fleshing out his character. We know that he's pretending to be someone he isn't, but for what reason? Another example of the film failing to explore a concept to its full potential is with Dani's public fall from grace. Although it's an inevitable part of her downfall and is crucial to her character arc, it's framed as being entirely her own fault, when it would have been far more interesting to explore the realities of parasocial relationships on the internet and social media mob mentalities. The film could have reiterated its points about ignorance and privilege by highlighting how the very same people who were once praising Dani are now the ones most vocal about hating her. And by refusing to acknowledge their part in her rise to fame, they're also part of the problem. This could have been accomplished by making one of Dani's former friends or co-workers use the public hatred of her to their advantage, becoming famous themselves and starting the cycle all over again. But instead, the film brushes over this digital hypocrisy rather quickly. Even the gravity of Dani's situation isn't fully expressed, with her lies only causing harm to herself, disregarding the fact that in the real world, this would have very real consequences for multiple people. Even the online shaming support group feels like a missed opportunity to explore cancel culture. Instead of it being a place where Dani is able to self-reflect, a far more interesting film would have explored the different things people did to be hated, whether or not they deserved it, and what they learned from it all.
White women.
So what, are we supposed to feel bad for you? I mean, you're saying you've learned, but at the end of the day, you're a privileged white girl who thinks she's the main character.
Although Rowan is an incredible character who is played expertly by Mia Isaac, she feels out of place in the film, which yes, is sort of the point as she's supposed to be a voice of reason, but it's more distracting than it is meaningful. All of the other characters, from Colin to Dani's parents to her co-workers, are played with a hint of irony that brings some much-needed humor to the film. But Rowan has none of that, coming across instead like a very real, traumatized teenager who needed to be in a traditional drama. I also think it's a disservice to the very real problem of gun violence to have it pushed to the sidelines in favor of a storyline about a white girl lying. Honestly, the best part of the movie, and the reason I was interested in watching it in the first place, is its costume design. A perfect snapshot of 2021 microtrends, costume designer Sarah Laux did a remarkable job of using clothing to help tell the story and develop its characters. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 15 years or so, people look to it as a source of fashion inspiration. In Dani's case, she starts off in a confused place aesthetically, wearing a gray, oversized hoodie combined with kitschy accessories. This not only highlights her lack of confidence, but also how desperate she is to be liked, wearing things that are supposed to be cool, but coming off as a try-hard instead. Not to mention that the gray hoodie is literally metaphorical for how depressed and numb she is, which is why it makes a return at the end of the film after her fall from grace. The character also wears an assortment of 2000s trends, not just because they've made a comeback, but because she desperately wants to return to her childhood, a time when she was actually happy. Dani has no idea who she is or what she wants, which is why she switches from wanting to be a journalist to an influencer to a political activist, and her desire for validation and community is reflected in her clothing. When she wants Colin's attention, she dresses in an assortment of trendy items that have absolutely no sort of individuality, hoping to appeal to him by mirroring the influencers in his circle. The character has no sense of self and wears whatever is trendy, which when combined, results in a look that is somewhat dated, even though those items individually could still be worn today. This is because with social media, the fashion and trend cycle is moving much faster than it has in the past, with the same privileged people that Dani is symbolic of being a huge part of the problem, constantly consuming what they're told to without bothering to develop their own opinions about it. In an interview, costume designer Sarah Laux said, quote, "Dani doesn't know fashion history. She doesn't necessarily even have good taste. She's just a consumer. She just takes and takes and takes and then sheds it," which is exactly what her personality is like as well. Once Dani loses interest in Colin and turns her attention towards Rowan, she begins to dress like her instead, sporting baggy pants and oversized shirts, which is similar to how Dani attempts to replicate Rowan's political activism. There aren't many male characters in contemporary films who wear clothing that I find interesting, but Colin is a definite exception to the rule. With his bleach blonde hair, hypebeast style, and shitty tattoos, his character takes notes from celebrities like Machine Gun Kelly, Pete Davidson, G-Eazy, and Justin Bieber. Besides these visual similarities, Dylan O'Brien even mimics their style of talking as well, symbolic of how these well-to-do white men steal elements of African American culture whenever it benefits them, which again, I think the film could have explored more thoroughly.
Damn, she still got that backside on her though. Got the thickie, that fatty, right?
Colin, you're from Maine.
Okay, cool, Harper, great. We all know information about each other.
Not Okay was hardly revolutionary, being an amalgamation of various other dark comedies that have been released in the last decade. But it had potential, which is probably what I found most disappointing, as it could have been a far more interesting film. What did you think of Not Okay? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!